Dear colleagues, it is a great honor to present to you today on sexual problems of gay and lesbian couples and the challenges they pose to therapists. We have to start with the unpleasant fact that there is very little research on healthy sexuality in gay and lesbian relationships available. That might be surprising because gay and lesbian sexuality is a big topic in the sexual-cultural sciences, but nevertheless, out of some reason, there is little research in the facts. So we have to rely mostly on anecdotal evidence with a few exceptions that I will mention. Let us start with what we know. Although more is known about gay male sexuality than lesbian sexuality, much of the literature on male-to-male sexuality focuses on safe sex practices and prevention of HIV transmission, not on the problems that arouse sexually, but which are secondary to sexual behavior. Outside of the topic of safe sex practices and prevention of HIV transmission, there is a paucity of research on gay male sexuality, including topics related to healthy sexuality in committed relationships. That's, of course, posing a challenge to us as therapists, because we need to know about our clients. And as everybody knows, it is not enough just to look at your individual client. You also have to get the bigger picture. But apparently, science is not up to this bigger picture. We have a lot of problem talking when it comes to homosexual and lesbian sexuality, but we don't know much about how their relationships really are working. An interesting fact, which you also might have encountered in your practice already, is there are higher levels of sexual dysfunction in homosexual men than in heterosexual men. In a study from 2014, 74% of gay men report sexual dysfunction as compared to only 30 to 50% of heterosexual male. What are the differences that might cause this difference in how homosexual couples perceive their sexuality in their relationships? It seems that gay men tend to have higher rates of anxiety about sex than do heterosexual men. This is an amazingly new study, only from 2017. So only since 6 years, somebody is studying how much psychological factors play a role in homosexual relationships. On the other side, gay male relationships tend to attribute a strong meaning to eroticism. That means they define even more than heterosexual couples if their relationship works through the lens of the sexual behavior that happens in that relationship. A very interesting finding, also very new finding, only from 2017, showed that gay men may experience internalized homophobia. Let us look at the term internalized homophobia. It means that internalized homophobia is defined as taking the biases, prejudices, and hatred towards gays reinforced by society, which is also known as societal homophobia, and turning these biases inward back. Internalized homophobia expresses itself in the form of self-hatred, shame, fear, anxiety, and depression for many gay people, whether they are out of the closet or not. So this is quite interesting because the main solution for all homosexual problems that our societies claim to be working is that they get out of the closet, that they get out into the public. But apparently, that is not true for internalized homophobia. What are the differences that might cause that internalized homophobia and the resulting effects of it? Well, we have to understand that gay men prefer different sexual acts from heterosexual people. Although we have seen in the last years that heterosexual couples are more and more also using homosexual sex practices, it is still the homosexual men who are leading the pack in this way. So one of the problems that might occur is pain during anal intercourse, and of course, much higher risk of HIV transmission. Gay male couples are more likely than heterosexual or lesbian couples to engage in consensual non-monogamy, which is now termed polyamory, means actually that the gay couple is not always, but quite often not exclusive. It is open to other partners to have sex with. Gay male couples tend to desire and engage in sexual behaviors more frequently than heterosexual couples. That might look like a no-brainer, but actually we have to be aware that with different sexual orientations, there comes also a difference in how much sex you want and how many different sexual practices you want. Although the research landscape for homosexual couples doesn't look bright, it can get even worse when we look at the sexual problems of lesbian women. So we have to state, and that was recently stated in 2015, sex research has very little knowledge about female sexual desire in general, much less even about female desire in lesbian couples. One can't repeat this too often. Although sexual science claims to be neutral and only interested in the sexual facts, there is a strong bias, as you might also have realized already. It is usually a male-centric view on sexuality. And that's even true for the research that is done by women. So the sexual problems of lesbian women are the same as with homosexual men, that there is a lack of sexual scripts for lesbian women, for whom very few sexual scripts exist aside from those in pornography, where said scripts are typically male-centric and focused on appealing to the male gaze. So while at the first glance it looks that the situation is better for homosexual couples when we look at the male couples, but actually it is also true that most of the ideas those couples have about sexuality are the result of watching pornography. But again, the situation is much more difficult for lesbian couples, and so the famous sexologist Tiefer concluded in 2001, and it seems there has very little change in those more than 20 years. Healthy lesbian sexuality is largely invisible. What are the differences of lesbian women? Some lesbians prefer to behave and appear in more feminine ways, called femme. Others prefer to behave and appear in more masculine ways, known as butch. And still others prefer a combination of the two, sub femme or feminine butch. We can see this is pretty much different to how heterosexual couples live their sexuality, because the complaint is that acting too much male or acting too much female are actually causing a problem for many people. Such expressions are related to individual preferences and can also be part of lesbian eroticism. Therapists unfamiliar with these very preferences may confuse such gender expressions with heterosexual posturing or a desire to take on traditional gender roles. Now let's look at what the concrete challenges for therapists are regarding the paucity of available sexological research, as well as the differences between gay and lesbian couples and heterosexual couples. First, we tend to have all heteronormative definitions of what sex is. That means that we usually see only factors such as penetration, orgasm, or genital contact as the important factor in sexuality, which means that we assume they are necessary in what is called successful sexual encounter. That's not necessarily true with homosexual or lesbian couples, where there is a much wider range of expressing their sexuality available, and that means that even the orgasm is not the holy grail that is usually for heterosexual sex research. What are the organic causations of sexual dysfunction in gay and lesbian people? Alcohol plays a more substantial role at the core of the gay and lesbian community, Bergmark found 1999. A substantial association between attending dance clubs and the use of ecstasy has also to be noted. So when gay couples come to our practice, we always have to make sure that we also look at their individual substance use. A higher prevalence of sexually transmitted diseases linked to substance use and unsafe sex is also one of the main factors we should keep our eye on. But there are also intra-psychic conflict causation of sexual dysfunction. Private development and expression of sexual identity, public expression of this sexual identity, what is commonly called coming out, and the development of an alternative value system and raison d'etre. That means that the homosexual couple is usually much more individual in their sexual expressions. When we look at other intra-psychic conflict causation of sexual dysfunction, we will see that there are also issues related to homophobic bullying. There are more severe depression occurring, there is more anxiety occurring, and there is more physical pain reported. The main difference is that heterosexual couples are repeatedly exposed to a variety of emotionally congruent relationship stereotypes throughout their development. It starts when heterosexual people are kids, goes further into puberty, and then later in adulthood. While it is uncommon for gay men and lesbians to have such an experience, the usual message depicted is one of instability, infidelity, and hopelessness. Gay couples co-create their own relationship framework, roles, narratives, and rules, and that means that fewer rules and boundaries lead also to greater flexibility and creativity. However, a greater strain on communication skills and self-knowledge is also put into effect. So, as it's well known that most benefits of whatever we do usually come to a price, and it seems that the price is sometimes heavy, taking a load on homosexual couples. Let us look shortly at the open relationship concept, which means that other sexual partners are enjoyed individually or by the couple together. The couple may or may not have explicit rules about what is permitted. The process of either explicitly or implicitly negotiating the nature, including the degree of permeability of this sexual emotional boundary is a challenge. So, when we look at the interpersonal conflictization of sexual dysfunction, we will see that questions arise of physical safety, of sexual health, of jealousy, of guilt, and of intimacy. Conversely, the couple's adoption of an open or semi-open relationship may be an adaptation to pre-existing sexual difficulties. For us as therapists, it is difficult to find good therapeutical solutions, especially when we are heterosexual ourselves. We have really to educate ourselves first about what the behavior of our homosexual clients really looks like. Otherwise, we will fall prey to prejudices and our own ideas what happens when homosexual people have sex. Resolution of these difficulties might also, for the homosexual couple, require a renegotiation of sexual emotional boundaries around the relationship. Sexual dysfunction should not be addressed in isolation from the couple relationship or for the single patient and their wider psychosexual context. Finally, we also have to look at the socio-cultural causation of sexual dysfunction. Cultural homophobia and heterosexism are expressed through legal restrictions, institutionalized homophobia, religious prohibitions, and, of course, also family intolerance. The therapeutical solution should look like wide variation is an individual couple's experience of homophobia. So we shouldn't have a fixed opinion, but really first should discover what the individual homosexual couple is telling us. A therapist has to explore both the experience and the impact of support and hostility on the individuals and their relationships. I repeat, the big problem we face as therapists and as researchers is that about homosexual sexuality and the problems that arise with it are very limited, and we have mostly only anecdotal evidence. However, in lesbian couples, it looks like sexual dysfunction is assumed to be rare because the ability to achieve orgasm and sexual satisfaction appears to be quite high among lesbians. However, we still find reports of primary and secondary anorgasmia and sexual desire disorders are also as common as with women in heterosexual relationships. The specific sexual problems in lesbian couples and the reasons why they arise are the same as with heterosexual couples: a lack of intimacy, power imbalances in relationships, guilt, and lack of romantic stimuli. So we see that although there are differences we really have to note as therapists, it seems that there are also many similarities when it comes to operate functional sexual relationship. As soon as it gets intimate, we have to look how this is handled by the couple and how the couple expresses this intimacy through their sexuality. So although there are differences, again, there are also many similarities. And I hope I could clarify where the differences are, and I hope I could make you curious to look more into the matter, how to help best your homosexual couples. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm looking very much forward to seeing you soon again in person, maybe next year in Turkey again.